this is Sujata Shirsagar, and today I'm going to cover the last chapter of Business Studies Part 2. This is chapter 12 on consumer protection. So till now, yani ab tak we have covered, and you should have ideally gone through financial management, financial markets and marketing in Business Studies Part 2, which brings us to the last chapter, chapter 12, consumer protection. So let's see what we're going to cover in consumer protection. Of course, we'll talk about who a consumer is, but in this chapter specifically, we're going to cover importance of consumer protection, what is consumer protection, the legal framework, rights and duties of a consumer, roles and functions of the consumer organization, and ways and means of consumer protection. Thodi lambi list hai, grab yourself a cup of coffee or tea and let's get started. Consumer is king, customer is king. This is something we have often heard of. But इस field में there is one distinct change which has happened. From caveat emptor, caveat emptor का मतलब है let the buyer beware, to caveat venditor, which means let the seller beware. अभी ये क्यों हुआ है? What has happened is earlier we used to warn the buyer saying carefully खरीदिए, be very careful what you buy, check and buy, blah 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 blah. But as the markets grew and as sales grew, a lot of organized and competition grew, what ended up happening or perhaps ended up happening is lot of companies may have resorted or would be tempted to resort to unfair trade practices, manipulating the sales, selling low quality goods, which automatically means the consumer's health could be impacted, the consumer could get cheated. And keeping all this in mind, over a period, like for everything else, Act came into place, which is the Consumer Protection Act, and we'll go through ye Act kab aaya, revision kab hua and all of it. But Consumer Protection Act came into place to protect the consumers, to make them aware of their rights and responsibility and to resolve things for them. And this mega shift from let the buyer beware to let the seller beware came about. Remember, consumer is still king, continues to be the king. And I'm going to narrate two small instances of how the act has been helpful to both parties. One is the affected and one is the, in one of the acts, the judgment is against the complainant, yani the person who is complaining. So the act actually takes care of people who are hurt in the process, which means agar wrong has been done to you, the act protects you. But if you misuse the act and you complain, the verdict or the judgment can get passed against you also. So look at the first case, Delhi Development Committee, and you can actually go onto the net and do further research, and if you actually go and type out the top cases, you'll be surprised as to how many consumers have been protected in what all manner. So the first case here is where the DDA did a double allotment of a plot. Bang! The verdict was please compensate. Yani you either provide a similar plot to the second allottee or you compensate, you pay an escalated price of that plot. So you cannot have a situation where you say, oh sorry, galti ho gayi, and move on. So that was Delhi Development Authority. There was another very interesting case where there was a complaint against HDFC Bank, which, the complainant said that the money was debited without my permission, without the permission of the holder. The National Commission investigated and figured out HDFC had done this debit based on orders of a statutory authority. So kya hua? Bang, the complainant got charges and the complainant had to now pay penalty. So you see how the Consumer Protection Act definitely protects the consumers, but if someone takes advantage of it and tries to gamify it, the verdict will get passed against the complainant also. So let's go on to see who is this consumer. Ye consumer kaun hai? Is the consumer and customer the same? Prima facie appears saying consumer and customer to ek hi hai, kya difference hai? But that is not the case. Now take an example. you all were going to school, you all are going to college, you all will study. So there is, when you all were going to school, who paid the fees? The fees was paid by your parents, by your mom, by your dad. So who are they? They are the actual customer. Yani the school is engaging and the payment is being made by your parents, one of your parents, both your parents. Whereas who's the consumer or who's the user of that service called school? Of course, partially the parents also, but in this case, you are the real consumer. So there is a difference between who the consumer is and who the customer is. So let's look at the definition of a consumer. And remember, once again, I tell this in all my sessions, pay attention to the definition. Isme kya pata question aa jaye and you should know the exact definition, right? A consumer is a person who is the final user of a product. आखिर में वो product पास होके कौन use करता है? और service, मतलब you can use a product, you go to a parlor, you get a haircut, that is not a product. Of course, they use product when you get a haircut, perhaps shampoo, vampoo, but actually you're utilizing the services of a hairdresser. If you go to a tailor to get a suit made, you're using the services called tailoring of your tailor. So a consumer is a person who's the final user of a product of a service or a service with the approval of the buyer or the customer. So the example in which I told you your parents pay the fees, but you avail of the services of the school, what has happened? If your parents pay fees and your friend goes to the school, will the friend be considered a consumer? Yes, if your parents know that your friend is going to use that service. So what is important is approval of the buyer is important, and that buyer equals customer. What does it exclude? Consumer excludes the person who has availed of such a service or goods for the purpose of resale or commercial use. So agar aapne product liya, so for example, I go and purchase a dozen apples from the market and I in turn sell it to 10 of my neighbors, एक apple करके, okay, ऐसे होता है. So what do I become? I become either a retailer in this case, I bought in wholesale and sold it to individual consumers. I am not the end user of that good called apples, hence I am not the consumer in this case. Can I then file anything under the Consumer Act, Protection Act? No. Okay, so you cannot be the intermediary or a person who is passing on. So you cannot resell that particular good or service. However, it includes anyone who uses it for earning livelihood by way of self-employment. So if you consume that service and you're generating livelihood for yourself, so for example, I am a tailor. I buy a sewing machine and I'm using the sewing machine to sew clothes for people, stitch clothes for people. So am I a consumer of the sewing machine? Yes. So I hope you understood the difference between who a consumer is and who a consumer is not. Okay. So let's include the new Consumer Protection Act, and we'll cover it in a little more in detail, which came out in 2019, includes all online transactions also. So, okay, so it includes all online transactions conducted through electronic means or direct selling or tele-shopping or multi-level marketing. Multi-level marketing kya hai? Amway does multi-level marketing. It's under major controversy, but that's for another day. But where you source, you sell it, you actually become a distributor, and your assignees or your recruitees or your agents go forward and sell, and you get the money for it, a percentage of the commission. That is multi-level marketing. So a consumer is a person who's the final user of goods or service, does not use it for commercial use in the sense further sale, but can use it for generating self-employment. 2. It includes online transactions conducted through electronic means, direct selling, tele-shopping or multi-level marketing. That is what a definition of a consumer is. Now what is consumer protection and why do we need consumer protection, right? So consumers could get subjected to, as I just spoke a little while back, unfair trade practices, manipulation by the seller, false commitment by the seller, recipient of inferior quality goods, a service promise not kept. So various things can happen with a consumer. Hence, this set of individuals need to have a mechanism by which if they go through an issue, they are protected. When I say protected, now if you fall ill, it doesn't mean that your hospitalization gets taken care of, but the fact that you've fallen ill because of using a good or a service, you are made good that negative act. So let's see what is the definition of consumer protection. Consumer protection, or the definition of consumer protection, is in very simple terms, protecting consumers from unfair trade practices adopted by who? The producers or the sellers of goods and services. Simple terms, जो बेचता है, whether it is goods, whether it's an equipment or सामान कोई बेचता है या services कोई render करता है, during that rendering of services or in the goods that the person has sold, it should be as per what the consumer expects based on what information the consumer has got. A act which protects the consumer, where the seller has to deliver the goods and services as per promise, is called the Consumer Protection Act. What does it include? It not only includes educating the consumers about their rights and responsibilities. Information क्या बोलना चाहिए, कितने हद तक, is all parts of the act, but it also helps against getting their grievances redressed. Now in the marketing chapter you saw packaging, labeling, importance of labeling. वो label के ऊपर सारा information company दे देती है. क्यों देती है? That's also got to do with disclosure. That's also got to do with a company has to mandatorily communicate a set of things when the company sells a good or a service to the consumer. अगर वहाँ पे कोई खामी है और कमी है, if the company doesn't do it, the consumer can actually go back and say, hey, you did this, you put a MRP of 100 rupees, but look what, when you sold it to me, you took 130 rupees. You can file a case under the Consumer Protection Act. So a Consumer Protection Act includes education about the rights and responsibilities and also helps the consumer in grievance redressal in case the company fails the consumer. What is importance of the Consumer Protection Act? Let's look at this quickly. So one is, consumers can be ignorant. उनको पता नहीं है. If they go and buy sugar, do they know उसमें कितना sulfur है, उसमें कितना क्या डाला है? So it is the consumer's right to know what that packet of sugar consists. So in order to save the consumer, from exploitation, and consumer protection is needed. So awareness, telling the consumer what is there in that goods and service he or she is receiving, telling the consumer what rights and responsibilities they have. So to help the consumer overcome their ignorance, the Consumer Protection Right Act puts out what are the things that must be necessarily communicated to the customer. Second is, a lot of consumers are unorganized. So you live in a locality, you go and buy stuff, you're not in touch with each other. So you usually not part of a committee or a forum or a set of people getting together where they can find out things. So consumer protection also, from consumers' point of view, where organizations are lacking, where this entire association or grouping is lacking, the Consumer Protection Act protects the consumer and makes the consumer become powerful. Third is, like we said, when the competition is very stiff, what could happen is companies could actually exploit, they could miscommit, miscommunicate. So in effect, the consumer could get exploited. From what? From unfair trade practices, from defective products, false advertising, hoarding पे डाल दिया, oh fair and lovely, so if you apply the cream you're going to look as pretty as the model who's there. In reality that's not the true. You're not going to become fair by applying fair and lovely cream. So there are a set of regulations or rules that the corporates have to follow, or the companies which are manufacturing these products and marketing these products have to follow when they put out ad. So the act is required because it gives the consumer protection from business malpractices and scams. What else does it, consumer protection का importance क्या है? So consumers के point of view से we have seen what is the important. Now let's look at a set of things from the business point of view. Do you think this act is justified or consumer protection is required from the business point of view? Absolutely. Because if the consumer is not going to feel happy using the goods and services, that consumer is never going to come back to the company. That consumer is never going to tell 10 other people to buy the products. Or company ka business ठप हो जाएगा. One time sale, bad experience, everything gets over. So in a way, this entire consumer protection is also important for the business, from the business point of view. So let's look at where all is it important. So one is from long-term business, because a lot of sales is repeat sale. Second is, the companies have a moral obligation to take care of their customer. ये उनका it is their responsibility to take care of the customer and the customer interest, and to avoid any form of exploitation. So in a way, the act, the consumer protection, that thing that they have to protect the customer, reins the company in and helps them not to do a set of things which otherwise they may be tempted to do. Third is, ये जो business है ना, that uses the entire society as its resources. So when you use the society to grow your business, you have a interest in that society. If you don't maintain the society in the way it is, and if you don't deliver your responsibility towards the society, towards the resources. So assume a company is producing paper. You require trees, you cut down trees. Now there are various things you can do, but it is in the company's benefit to plant more trees so that they can get raw materials in the future, to find alternate method to actually source raw materials for that paper. So there is a social responsibility that each of the companies have to deliver. And then of course there is the last of the responsibilities is the government intervention. So if a business engages in any unfair trade practices, the government will take action against it and the company will lose goodwill. So in fear of the government, you can say, or ensuring that they don't get into trouble with the government, the companies, it is in companies' interest to ensure that they are protecting the customer. So with that, we move on to what is the legal framework now for consumer protection. So the Indian legal framework has evolved over a period, and there are various acts, and I'm going to breeze through some of these acts. Now these, you just have to look at it, make a note of it. There are ballpark 10 acts, and I'll start in a LIFO method, last in first out. The last of the act, and Consumer Protection Act 1986 के बाद 2019 में भी रिवाइज हुआ है, and we'll go through the differences. But the Consumer Protection Act pretty much provides safeguards to consumers against defective goods and deficient services. Say halwa खा के बीमार पड़ गए, it's a defective good. You got food poisoned, Consumer Protection Act will protect you. बाल काटते हुए the hairdresser actually by mistake made you bald. You can actually go and file a case under the Consumer Protection Act. So it protects against deficient services. Then there is a 3-tier machinery, and we'll come to it, which is the District Forum, State Commission and the National Commission. So there are 3-tier approach under the Consumer Protection Act. We'll come and do this in detail. Then the Indian Contract Act. Now the Indian Contract Act, this is 1872, lays down the condition in which promises made by parties to a contract is binding on each other. So this is for any contractual agreement. Then there is a act which is the Sales of Good Act. इसमें क्या है? It provides for safeguards and reliefs to the buyers of goods in case the goods purchased by the buyer do not comply with the things stated. Refrigerator kharida, it says it will cool to whatever degrees, it doesn't cool. Then you are protected against the Sale of Good Acts. What is the other act? Essential Commodities Act. Essential Commodities Act provides some safeguards. Essential Commodities Act actually aims at controlling the production supply of essential commodities. So suppose essential commodities में inflationary trends है and किसी ने बोल दिया इसकी pricing say a very life saving drug, essential commodity है, उसका cost of production is 20 rupees a tablet, but the company says oh no, I'll price it at 200. That is an unfair trade practice, not allowed. Or the company says let me stop production, suddenly create a dearth of the product in the market. Unfair. So Essential Commodities Act takes care of all of these things. Then you have something called the Agricultural Produce Act, and I'm going to breeze through some of this because itna important nahi hai, but please read what's written there. You need to know that there are these set of acts for consumer protection. So this actually prescribes the grades and standards of agricultural as well as livestock products. Then you have, and sorry, ये जो हम AGMAR के सुनते हैं, egg mark, this I think all of you are familiar with. That is a part of your Agricultural Produce Act where grading is done based on this egg mark. Now, Prevention of Food Adulteration Act, this is to ensure purity of food is maintained, it is not adulterated, and this is in the interest of public health. Then you have the Standards of Weights and Measures Act. In weighing, is the company doing the right thing is what goes under this act. You have, then you have the Trademarks Act. So this act has been replaced by the Trade and Merchandise Mark Act. So primarily we went through this when we did marketing. Every company has a brand name and a brand mark. जब वो brand mark register करते हैं, trademark आ जाता है, and another company cannot use similar trademarks. So if you violate that, you can get penalized under the Trademark Act. Then you have the Competition Act. So this one has been replaced by the MRTP Act 1969. So बहुत उस ज़माने में बहुत ही monopolistic trade practices होते थे. So the government came out with a MRTP. Okay. Then you have the Bureau of Indian Standards Act, which is BIS 1986. So this has two major activity. One is the quality standards of goods through the BIS certification. So in a lot of products you can see a BIS mark. तो ये हो गए the ISI mark or the BIS mark. So with this we come to roughly around 10 acts, and the Consumer Protection Act 1986, there is a revision to that in 2019. Let's go through the basic differences of these two acts or what got added. So one is on the pecuniary jurisdiction, the financial jurisdiction. So earlier District Forum could do up to 20 lakhs, State Commission 20 lakhs to a crore, and National Commission 1 crore and above. ये amounts change हो गए, district level पे 1 crore तक कर सकते हैं. State Commission 10 crore तक, and National Commission में 1 crore and above जाता है. So this is one of the key differences, the pecuniary jurisdiction. The second is MRP or maximum purchase price. So earlier MRP was criteria to decide the jurisdiction. Now the actual price, actual sales price is the criteria. So ये जो limits है, this does not apply on the MRP but on the actual sales price, and usually the sales price can be up to MRP, so it has to be lower than MRP. Third, territorial jurisdiction, seller has the office tha pehle, now to ease it for the complainant, it has become where the complainant has office or resides. Fourth is the regulator, there was no regulator, now there is a Central Consumer Protection Authority. Fifth is mediation. क्या मांडवली जो बोलते हैं, can you do an arrangement between yourself rather than file case and all. Now court can refer the case for settlement through mediation. There is a section which has come about in the 2019 Act. What else is different? There are 10 odd points. Appeal. Earlier 30 days appeal था, अभी 45 days है now for the award. You can appeal within 45 days to the next higher authority. E-com, earlier no specific thing was mentioned for e-commerce. 2019 में one of the biggest changes, e-com transactions have gotten covered because as you know e-com transactions have picked up. Then what else is important here? Unfair terms and conditions, पहले कोई provisions नहीं थे, अभी new act actually gives the power to the state commission to declare any of the terms of contract which are unfair to be null and void. Unilaterally वो state commission and national commission उसको declare कर सकते हैं. So there are approximately these 10 differences between the Consumer Protection Act 1986 and 2019. Remember one thing, while we've gone through the 2019 Act, आपके syllabus में तो 86 वाली Act है, and other than those 10 changes, अगर वहाँ से कोई question आ जाता है, I think you all are better prepared. You can go back to that screen and take a screenshot to know the difference. I have put it in a tabular format. So let's look at the rights of the consumer under the Consumer Protection Act, and everything that we'll speak here on will be the Consumer Protection Act 1986. But it's important for you to know there is another one which has come out in 2019 with the revisions, the differences that I pointed out earlier. Now, what are the rights of the consumer under the Consumer Protection Act? So it provides for 6 rights, and these are intended to empower, promote and protect the consumer's interest against any unscrupulous exploitation and unfair trade practices. So it empowers, promotes and protects the consumer's interest against these acts of the company through speedy and inexpensive redressal. सारी चीजें important है. Speed, कम पैसे में, ऐसे नहीं कि I have to hire a lawyer and I have to do a set of things. So the Consumer Protection Act actually gives a lot of leeway to the consumer, including informing the consumer of his or her rights. Okay. Then let's look at what are these rights. The first is right to safety, protection against life and health hazards, physical safety. अगर वो goods कंज्यूमर के लिए फिजिकली डैमेजिंग है, उसकी सेहत के लिए हानिकारक है, सो द कंज्यूमर प्रोटेक्शन एक्ट प्रोटेक्ट्स द कस्टमर or consumer, not the customer, against that. Second is right to be informed. Lot of these acts, if you see, even SEBI, when we covered the financial markets, right to information, jankari dena is a very integral part of the acts, because if you don't inform the consumer of his or of her or his rights, how will the consumer ever know what is right or wrong? So complete information on price, content, quality, and this, when we did marketing, we went through this in detail, saying price तो बताना ही है, इसमें क्या क्या content है, if it's a food item बताना है, what is the expiry. So there is a certain set of must inform consumers which is a part of the act. The third, of course, is right to choose. So a consumer today also, if I want to buy, say, sugar, no company can say hamara hi lo or this is all you can take. I have a right to choose between products of different companies. I also have a right to choose within products of the same company. So when you go to buy a clothing, I can choose size medium, small, large. I can choose a red color top or a blue color top. No company can tell me, nahi boss, ye sara hai, but I will give you only blue. So right to choose is another thing across brands and also within the same company. Then right to be heard. If something wrong has been done to me, I have a right as a consumer to go and complain, and my complaint will be redressed, which means addressed. Okay, and the ways of redressal or addressal we will talk to. Of course, the last one is right to seek redressal. एक तो मेरी सुनो, two मुझे justice दो. So both of these happen. So these are the rights. And in redressal, typically, अगर हम वॉशिंग मशीन खरीदते हैं, so the first step of redressal is खराब हो गई, रिपेयर करो. ठीक है, रिपेयर नहीं हो सकती, रिप्लेस करो, और रिप्लेस नहीं करना, कॉम्पेंसेट करो. सो ऑल दीज मैकेनिज्म्स एंड ऑप्शंस आर अ पार्ट ऑफ आवर Consumer Protection Act. And the last one is right to consumer education, which means under the act the company has to inform and give information to the consumer. The consumer has to be aware of his or her rights, has to be aware of everything that goes into a product, what will it deliver, what does it have, etc., etc., and should have the knowledge hence on how to operate it and stuff like that. Yeah. Now let's look at, does this act just stop at company ne ye sab karna chahiye? No. It also puts the ball in the consumer's court and says, hey, you also have rights and you have rights and you also have responsibilities and duties. So what are your responsibilities and duties? Can I just pick up that and say, oh, I thought iska 100 rupees hai, but look what he took 150. Sorry, please read the label. So what are the duties and responsibilities of a consumer? So be aware of the various goods and services available in the market. Don't say मुझे नहीं पता था ये alternative भी है, मेरी requirement के लिए this other thing was better suited. Then you should make yourself aware. Second is buy only standardized goods so that they give you quality assurance. Don't go and buy something which you say, oh, this packet उसमें कुछ नहीं लिखा है, I bought it, now the person who sold it has to tell me 10 things. No, you have to go and choose. So for example, ISI mark or FPO mark for food or hallmark on jewelry, etc. So there are various marks for each category of product. As a consumer, when you go and buy it, please ensure you are looking at that and buying ki uska thappa laga hai, then you know it is quality assured. Third thing is learn about the risks associated with the products. So and follow the manufacturer's instruction. Chalo microwave le liya, I want to bake a cake, I have no clue, I'm too lazy to read the instruction manual, or I think, oh, I know how to do it, I've operated many microwaves. Kya pata, this one operates differently. So you should ensure when you are operating the good or using the good, you are reading what the company has told you. After that, what else is important? As rights and duties, responsibilities and duties of a customer, read the labels, वहाँ पे सब कुछ लिखा है. Assert yourself to ensure that you get a fair deal. So suppose MRP उसमें लिखी है 100, the seller says pay 110, you say sorry, it is 100, I'll pay you 100. Assert yourself at the point of sales. Choose only from legal goods. अगर आपने कुछ खरीद लिया which you know is illegal, then the Consumer Protection Act is not going to help you. Black marketing. Chalo, I know I'm buying it. Iski price 100 rupees. I'm getting it at 20. I know this is a stuff which somebody else has refused. And now if something goes wrong with that, the Consumer Protection Act will not protect the consumer. The last is ask for a cash memo. So ek receipt bill le lena taki that is proof of purchase. What else? File a complaint in an appropriate consumer forum. You know there is an act, so you know what forums are there, and these are the forums which will play an active role to get your complaints resolved. Last is you respect the environment. So do not buy anything firstly which will pollute the environment or contributes to polluting the environment. We have looked at what are the duties of a company, what should they do. We've looked at what are the responsibilities and duties of a consumer. Now let's look at what are the ways and means of consumer protection. The first one, ये consumer protection होता कैसे है? What is the method? How does it happen? The first is self-regulation by business. So many a time now, if you actually look at some of the reputed companies especially, you will always find the contact number of say customer service or customer grievance or complaint cell. So lot of companies have realized that they cannot antagonize the customer, and if they have done some wrong unknowingly, they have to give a avenue for the customer to come and get their redressal. So self-regulation by business is a way and mean of how consumer protection gets affected. What is the other? Business association. So a lot of associations like the CII, FICCI have laid down code of conduct or guidelines for their members to say, if you are a FICCI member, this is how you need to conduct yourself as a company, which helps or lays down these rules for how that company should behave with its customers. And that in effect is protecting the customers from a whole lot of things which the customers should not go through. Third is consumer awareness. The act per se facilitates it, but there's a lot of information available in the open source in the market whereby the consumer awareness itself has gone up, and that facilitates the entire consumer protection as an activity. Fourth is there are consumer organizations which are all the time taking it upon themselves to educate the customer. And the last but not the least, the legal framework that the government provides is in a way a deterrent, but also a facilitation of deterrent for the companies, but also facilitates consumer protection and the entire functioning of this mechanism called consumer protection. So let's look at now what are the salient features of the Consumer Protection Act. Under what circumstances can complaints be filed? कब complaint file हो सकती हैं? So first is, अगर मैन्युफैक्चरर ने या सर्विस प्रोवाइडर ने या गुड्स प्रोवाइडर ने कोई फ्रॉडुलेंट प्रैक्टिसेस की हैं. दूसरा, उन्होंने फ्रॉडुलेंट प्रैक्टिसेस नहीं की है, बट लुक व्हाट द गुड्स आर डिफेक्टिव. So you can actually complain under that situation. Third, services hire की है, deficiency है, not intended, doesn't matter. The services were not rendered as per the understanding of the consumer or the recipient. You can go and file a complaint. Within what period must the complaint be filed? I bought something. 10 साल बाद मुझे याद आया, ओ शख्स वो काम ही नहीं कर रहा, can I go and file? No, because the company also has to know what is the liability. So there is a timeline within which the complaint needs to be filed. The timeline specified under the Consumer Protection Act is within 3 months of purchase. And if some testing of the good is required, so these are exceptional conditions, you can do it within 5 months. But वो क्या conditions है, कौन से product में है, you will have to be mindful of it. But go with the rule, thumb rule is 3 months के under the complaint has to be filed. And what will be checked to check 3 months? It will be that cash memo, which we said when you buy something, please take a receipt or a cash memo. Then comes, how can one file a complaint? बता दिया complaint file करनी है, कैसे करें? So complaint can be filed, and अगर आप net पे जाओ, ये सब लिखा है, via the government provided, there's a portal, there is a link through which you can do it, and there are apps. India की यही beauty है, for everything like this, we've achieved scale beautifully through apps. And अगर आप सोचते हो ऐप कौन यूज करता है, सारे रूरल इंडिया में भी यूज करते हैं. So even for complaint, an app has been launched. Who can file a complaint? Any consumer, which means the end user of the goods can file or service can file a complaint. Second is any registered consumer association. चलो से consumer को food poisoning हो गई and the person passed away. Can the consumer file it? No. A consumer association on behalf of the consumer can file it. Third, central and state governments can file it. Fourth, say the consumer used and a product again passed off, died. Who can file it? The legal heir or representative. Fifth, one or more consumers on behalf of numerous consumers. Party हुई, जलेबी खा ली, food poisoning हो गई, 3 people are in the hospital. They are not going to be able to file a complaint. But the others who were in the party who saw this happen, similar interest group can go and file a complaint. And last, अगर बच्चा है छोटा सा, juvenile है, the parents can file a complaint. Against who can you file a complaint? So seller, manufacturer, dealer of the goods, जिसमें default हुआ है, and service provider, जिसने service provide की है, उसके against. So basically the person who has rendered or delivered the goods or service, उसके against complaint file की जा सकती है. who cannot file a complaint. बहुत ज़रूरी है to know who cannot file a complaint. So one is a person who updates, sorry, and we also said that person is not a consumer, right? A person who obtains the goods for resale, commercial use, cannot file a complaint. Person who uses the goods without the approval of the buyer. मम्मा ने कुछ खरीदा, बेटे ने यूज कर लिया, without the permission of the buyer, cannot file a complaint. Person who avails of the services without the approval of the hirer. Same. Services अगर है, I paid for the services, my friend utilized the services, of course without knowing the pluses and minuses, caused some damage, cannot file a complaint. Person who obtains the good without any consideration, free में ले लिया, चोरी करके ले लिया, can you file a complaint? No, it has to be paid for. Last is same, goods है और ये services है. Whether you buy goods or services or hire services without a consideration, you cannot file a complaint. Now what are the redressal agencies? We spoke about Consumer Protection Act में there are redressal agencies. It's a multi-tiered or a three-tiered kind of process. So first is the district forum, second is the state commission and third is national commission. जैसे local court होता है, फिर high court होता है, supreme court होता है. Similar in this also, district forum, district court, state commissions, high court, national commission, you say it's the Supreme Court. So you can go step by step. इसने नहीं resolve किया, you go to the next level and the next level. Let's quickly go through what are the differences. किस level पे क्या rights हैं? When do you escalate? When do you go to the next level? ये table की तस्वीर खींच लो. It has a lot of content and please read it at leisure. I will just take you through some of the salient features. So ये jurisdiction में कितने district commission में the services or the goods value cannot exceed 5 lakhs. That is one financial consideration. If you see jurisdiction में ये है 20 lakhs and ये है about 20 lakhs. The second thing is any person who's aggrieved can appeal to the next level. So district commission में you are unhappy, you can go to the state commission by depositing so much money within 30 days. Now ये दोनों 30 days भी शायद 45 days हो गए हैं if I am not mistaken. Please you also check it once. I have to check it. ये for each of these, if you are unhappy within 45 days you can go off to the next level of the commission or redressal mechanism. What is the relief available when you go and approach these commissions or file your plea with the consumer forums for redressal? क्या क्या हो सकता है? So one is to remove the defect of good and service. I bought a washing machine. Look, your guarantee was it will never get spoiled. It's gotten spoiled. So remove that defect. Please repair it and give it to me. What is second? You can't repair it. Please replace it. Yeah, I mean replace the part, replace the machine. You free it from defect in whichever way. Either repair karo ya replace karo. Third is chalo you can't do both. I can't repair it, the tumbler is gone of the washing machine, give me back my money, because your commitment was in the first 3 years nothing will happen. If it happens, I will take care of it. Last is, ये तो हो गया सामान goods में, but what if I suffered, my health suffered, I ate something in a restaurant and food poisoning and I have suffered in terms of my health, then you actually or the company or the service provider or the goods provider has to compensate for the loss or injury. Third, the next the company has to do is, once the company knows that this has caused damage, they have to take away that damage for future customers, which means you have to discontinue that error or set right that error for all your future sales or services. And if it is obviously a very harmful good, take it off your shelf, take it off the market. So ये सब अच्छा है हम बोल लेते हैं. To implement this is a whole lot of work. Consumers have to know, they have to complain, somebody has to redress. So at the back end in the machinery, there are a lot of entities, individuals, organizations working to ensure that आगे जाके और customers को तकलीफ ना हो, दिक्कत ना हो. So roles and functions of such organizations and also non-governmental organizations, NGOs as we call them, is educating the general public about the consumer rights. By doing what? By organizing training programs, seminars and workshop. ये एक इनकी responsibility हो गई. 2. Publishing periodical and other publications, information, publications, disseminate information. 3rd, providing legal assistance. If the consumer does not have money to approach somebody and they have to engage a lawyer, then these institutions provide that assistance. 4th, producing films or cassettes for misuse, on food and misuse of drugs. In short, helping the consumers file the complaint is what these organizations do. With that, we have come to the end of the chapter Consumer Protection, and a big congratulations to you because this is the last chapter of Business Studies Part 2. With that, we have completed Business Studies Part 2, and I'm assuming Part 1 you finished before you hopped on to Part 2. So congratulations, that is all that we have covered in this chapter. Have a nice day.